Hi everybody, welcome to this new episode of the WAN Network Show. I'm Rémi Laurin from Semtech, LoRaWAN director at Semtech and also chairing the LoRa Alliance operator community. Today, I'm more than happy to welcome Mr. Alper Yegin from Actility and chairman of the technical committee of the LoRa Alliance and also vice chair of the LoRa Alliance. So Alper, please introduce yourself and your company before we dig into this awesome topic that is LoRaWAN roaming.
Thank you, Rémi. It's good to be back to your show. Hello, everyone. My name is Alper Yegin. I'm the VP of Advanced Technology Development in Actility and also Vice Chair of the LoRa Alliance and Chair of the Technical Committee. Actility is a core network vendor, a founding member of the LoRa Alliance and a permanent board member of the LoRa Alliance. And with the core network product we have, the product family is called ThinkPark. We provide connectivity for both public operators and private networks all around the world.
Thank you, Alper. So as the technical committee chair, you've been deeply involved in this LoRaWAN roaming. Can you simply explain what LoRaWAN roaming is and what problems it solves?
Sure. So as the audience knows, a couple of the advantages of LoRaWAN is the very low cost infrastructure and also ability to use this technology without any license. So that gave birth to this technology being used all across the world, people deploying LoRaWAN at home, in their campus, in their buildings. Then there are citywide networks, nationwide, and also even planet-wide networks. So LoRaWAN networks are popping up all around the world. And in a sense, this is somewhat similar to what has happened with Wi-Fi. We see Wi-Fi everywhere. So with Wi-Fi, even though Wi-Fi is everywhere, when it comes to really using it, it's practically nowhere except for the Wi-Fi that we own and manage. So in my neighborhood, my neighbors have Wi-Fi, but I cannot use them. The reason is these Wi-Fi networks are all isolated. They don't collaborate with each other. So having recognized this issue for the LoRaWAN, we have designed our standards and even the ecosystem such that LoRaWAN networks will be able to collaborate from the very beginning. So roaming is the feature that enables us to integrate networks so they can act as one towards the end user. So and with the roaming feature, an isolated network that I have at home, with the LoRaWAN network in my apartment complex and the city, they can all integrate with each other, and then they can present themselves as a single network towards an end device that I'm enabling across these networks. So it's our way of building larger networks by putting together the radio access network assets from multiple networks.
Okay, clear. So we can, in a nutshell, we can say that roaming is to enable a device to span across multiple networks, right?
Exactly, right. So my device, while it's under the coverage of my home, it's good to go. But the moment it drives away or walks away, in case of my dog's color, right, it'll have to be served by another network. So through roaming, I can still keep my device connected. In this particular case, it's a mobile device that crosses the network borders. And then there are also cases where there are multinationals that has assets in multiple countries, and they would like to keep their devices connected. So that means they would need to have some of their devices under the coverage of a public operator in one country and some devices in another country. And then through roaming, this multinational with assets all around the world, even if they are not mobile, even if they're not moving, they are physically scattered around the coverage of multiple networks. So that multinational network has the ability to roam into other networks to bring the data that are received by several distinct networks and aggregate them at a single place. So whether it's a mobile device that crosses the borders, or if it's a fleet of fixed devices but that are scattered across different countries, cities, or different networking domains, we have the ability to bring the data from all of these networks to a single LoRaWAN core network by using the roaming feature.
Very interesting. It's a kind of new paradigm because if you think of cellular for the last 30 years, roaming was mainly mobile devices. What you are saying today is that roaming is also to enable one network, just one network, even if your assets are fixed. I like that. So Alper, where does LoRaWAN roaming stand today? And do you see, let's say, many LoRaWAN networks roaming enabled?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the roaming specification, the standard specification, we have built that and published around 3 years ago. Ever since then, practically every LoRaWAN network infrastructure vendor has implemented that. And also now we see more than 40 roaming-enabled networks deployed in the field. And this includes public networks, private networks, and community networks as well.
Okay. Could you share the key steps of enabling LoRaWAN roaming between two networks, and specifically how Actility has solved this problem of interconnected many networks across a unique platform in the market?
Sure. So in order to enable roaming between two networks, each network needs to have a roaming capable network server. And secondly, they should have their own network ID. And network ID is for identifying networks and in return, identifying the devices as they move around. And in order to get a net ID, one needs to apply to the LoRa Alliance. And as of around 6 months ago, now net IDs can be allocated not only to the members, but also non-members as well, in order to help the whole ecosystem benefit from the roaming feature. And then the third step is to set up interconnection between these two network servers. Having identified them using net ID, now there needs to be an interconnection, which is an IT procedure. And this is how you enable roaming. You don't need to do anything on the end devices. We call it a passive roaming, meaning that the roaming procedures are totally transparent to the end device, which makes it much easier to deploy on the end devices, even after they get deployed in the field. And on the Actility side, we've been playing a leadership role in the development of the roaming feature. We have led the development of the roaming specification. We were the very first vendor to implement it and interoperate and deploy in the field. And seeing the rapid adoption of the roaming feature, we realized the way to make it easier for everyone to interconnect the networks is to use a roaming hub. The roaming hub concept is not something we invented. It's been widely used with Wi-Fi and cellular as well. So when several networks want to interconnect, instead of building a mesh interconnect among them, everyone connects through one or multiple hubs. So little less than 3 years ago, we built the very first roaming hub. It's called ThinkPark Exchange. And ever since then, we've been adding networks to that platform. Right now, there are nearly 40 networks connected to ThinkPark Exchange, and they include terrestrial public operators, satellite operators, community networks, private networks, joint servers, and academia as well. And today, more than 95% of the roaming traffic in the LoRaWAN ecosystem is being carried over this roaming hub.
So Alper, if I well understand you, if I want to interconnect 50 networks, I have two options. Either I do it peer-to-peer and I will replicate my cost and my pain to interconnect each of the network. When I come to Actility ThinkPark Exchange, I connect one-off and then benefit from a switching capabilities with any other networks. That is reducing my pain, my cost, and helps me to scale. I like this paradigm in the market.
Exactly. So another way to look at that is we have built the backbone of the LoRaWAN, and by physically connecting or interconnecting to the backbone once, you can peer with anyone else. The only thing left behind after this technical interconnection is a commercial agreement. Just because you're on the backbone doesn't mean that you need to allow everyone else to roam with you. There's still the commercial or the agreement-wise or a policy management on top of that, and it just becomes a matter of a single handshake to let the messages flow and devices start roaming in and out of all these other networks.
Very interesting, Alper. I often listen to you when you are making some webinars or communication, and specifically at the LoRaWAN World Expo in Paris in July. You are often saying that LoRaWAN roaming is a game changer on the market because it can connect any type of network. It is something completely new on the telecommunication market. Think about cellular that was mainly connecting public network to public network. Can you elaborate on this capability to interconnect any type of network and explain how Actility proved to the market that it was possible?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So with the way we have defined the LoRaWAN roaming technical specification, we made sure it's super easy for anyone to implement and configure and highly scalable. So that's one differentiation. Secondly, our ecosystem from the very beginning is very roaming friendly. In fact, even though the technical feature is called roaming, effectively it is network collaboration and network cooperation. This is the spirit behind this whole feature. And there's a very simple reason behind that. The IoT or the massive IoT problem that we are cracking is such a challenging problem. Everyone understands no single company or organization can single-handedly address the whole massive IoT problem space for the whole planet. So the collaboration is also in the spirit of the LoRa Alliance members. So with that, the technical ease and the right mindset and the philosophy around that, we've been able to interconnect all sorts of networks. So not only we have roaming between public operators, but we have roaming between public and private networks, and even between private and private networks. And then the LoRaWAN technology being low cost and highly accessible, we see a lot of innovation around that, one of which is the building of community networks, and we see super large community networks emerging as well. So that constitutes the third type of network, right? Public, private, and community networks. And we've also been interconnecting community networks like ThinkPark Community, like Helium, with the public and private networks as well. And not only we're doing that on the ground, but also in space as well. So there's another dimension there. Now we see numerous LEO and GEO satellites being launched, providing LoRaWAN service. And we've been also interconnecting them with their peers on the ground, both public and private as well. So in multiple dimensions, we have this ability to interconnect all these networks. And so you're asking specifically like to give some evidence, right? So I can talk about a couple of specific cases. So the first example I'd like to provide is public to private roaming. Schneider Electric has electric cabinets that are connected. And these electric cabinets have sensors to detect fire, unauthorized door opening, access, and also power loss. And these cabinets are scattered across multiple countries in Europe, like France, Switzerland, Netherlands, and Belgium. And obviously, Schneider Electric doesn't have a radio network to cover all these countries. And instead, what it does is it has its own core network where all these devices are provisioned. And then Schneider has, through ThinkPark Exchange, set up roaming with public operators in those countries, such that when these cabinets were to send uplink frames saying, there's fire or everything is good, those uplink frames are received by the public operators, the terrestrial public operators in these countries, and then they are pushed to the Schneider Electric's core network via ThinkPark Exchange, and through a single platform to manage the devices and the connectivity and integrate with their own applications, Schneider is able to leverage multiple public operator networks and their coverage across Europe. So that is an example of a private to public roaming.
Got it. Alper, if I am a LoRaWAN network provider, so I heard the podcast, I listened to the podcast, and I would like to implement LoRaWAN roaming. What would be the step? Where could I find the right information, the relevant information?
Sure. So we have a detailed webinars on LoRaWAN roaming. I would recommend watching them. On the resource hub, resource library of LoRa Alliance, there are in-depth material. But again, in a nutshell, you should get a roaming capable network server like the one we have, Actility ThinkPark, and obviously there are other players in the ecosystem as well supporting roaming. And then you need to get a net ID from the LoRa Alliance. And third, you should identify who you would like to peer with, your roaming partners. And then you need to do a technical interconnection, and that's where we offer connecting to ThinkPark Exchange to make it easy to interconnect with an ever-growing list of roaming partners. And if you don't have your own network to roam with others, you may be an end user and you have some devices that will be moving around, or they may be scattered across multiple countries, and you would like to have a one-stop shop. Then again, you can come to us, Actility, and we can provide references among all our customers who provides roaming in multiple countries. You can become a subscriber to such operators that has roaming agreement in multiple regions, and they would enable your assets to be moving around or being activated in multiple parts of the world.
Thank you, Alper, for simplifying the journey of network providers, but also customers, because the final goal is to have customers happy with this LoRaWAN roaming. You are again changing the market with this multi-network type roaming. It's really the route to pervasive coverage, right? What would be the next step of this LoRaWAN roaming now? Or maybe what are the hot topics that you are working on?
Sure. So like I said, we already have numerous networks already roaming among themselves. So public to public and public to private roaming is effectively used in commercial setting. Now, what we have technically enabled is the third step is roaming between community networks and the other types of networks. Right now, that is technically in place, and now we are seeing this being turned into commercial agreements as well. And all those public and private networks that like to extend their coverage or complement their coverage, leveraging pretty large community networks now, they are at the early phase of enabling their flows. So technically, it's a check mark. Commercially, it's work in progress, but it's just, we're like on the verge of seeing a lot of them getting enabled within the next couple of weeks and maybe a month. And then right behind that, we're adding is, so again, we have enabled technical interconnection between satellite networks and other types of networks. But the satellite networks, some of them are still on the verge of enabling their commercial services, even without roaming, just pure satellite coverage. And new types of satellite networks are also emerging. So that's kind of a relatively more fresh area in terms of connectivity. We also see not only LEO satellites, but also geo satellites are getting in place. And on the technical side, in the LoRa Alliance Technical Committee, we have created a satellites task force to look at how to adapt LoRaWAN to work even better with this new type of connectivity. So the basic connectivity is all in place, and now we're looking at further optimizations to provide through LoRaWAN as the new types of networks are emerging. So there's a little bit more work on that front, but nevertheless, that's in the pipeline. So you can expect to see roaming between satellite networks and the other types of networks coming up in the following months as well. So that's what we have in the pipeline. Obviously, while we're doing that, we keep adding more networks to the roaming hub and then more agreements among them and seeing the increase in the traffic. And just to give you an idea about how much traffic is increasing, within the past 6 months, the amount of traffic we push through the roaming hub has quadrupled. So that's much faster than the adoption of IoT in general, obviously, and LoRaWAN adoption. So the roaming acceleration is pretty promising, and it's on a very, very good trajectory right now.
Very exciting, Alper. Thank you very much for being so clear on roaming. Feel free, guys, to join the LoRa Alliance. Thank you to listen to the podcast. Follow us on the social. Don't forget it. Register. And I'm very excited to have you for the next episode. Alper, it was great, as usual. Very clear. Have a fantastic day. And looking forward to talking with you in the WAN Network Show, maybe one day.
Thank you very much, Remy. It's a pleasure, as always. Thanks for hosting this session as well.
So LoRaWAN roaming has been published by the LoRa Alliance as a specific specification 3 years ago. So it's in place. Roaming is just enabling multiple network as being presented at one network to the end users. So from a device perspective, it's just expanding the coverage. Roaming use cases can be either a mobile device spanning across multiple networks, can be in multiple countries, or different set of fixed assets connecting multiple networks. It's about the one-stop provisioning on one-stop shop. If you want to know more about LoRaWAN roaming, please connect to the LoRa Alliance website in the research repository, and you will find webinars and documents on roaming, or reach out just to Alper Yegin, Actility. Actility has set up a global peering or roaming hub that has interconnected more than 40 networks today. They have been able also to connect any type of network that is really game-changing the market: private network, public network, community network, and satellite network. And last but not least, we see a growing demand on roaming. As Alper said, in the last 6 months, the roaming traffic on Actility ThinkSpark Exchange has quadrupled. If you want to know more about roaming, feel free to reach out to Alper. Thank you for your time, and stay tuned. More interviews to come. Follow us on the social. Don't forget to register to the WAN Network Show.